Hi, Tony from All the Remote Things here again, and I'm here with Jing Wang Herman. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Tony, for having me.
Oh, fantastic, Jing. Would you like to introduce yourself to everybody and let everybody know a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you for this opportunity. I am Jing Wang Herman. I am the co-founder of 20 Muses, as well as the chief builder of buildthefuture.work.
That's brilliant. And we're going to dig into a little bit deeper into what those things are and where it all came from. Let me just preface this how I got involved with Jing. Um, I've been involved in a couple of those communities because I discovered them through the remote AF scanning of the remote environments. Because we're always looking for these new exciting things that are happening in the remote and hybrid environments, and we came across 28 users, and then that spanned out into building the future, and I've joined both of those communities and been part of, which has been a very excellent experience, and we'll talk about that a little bit deeper. So I reached out to Jing and said we'd love to have you on the cast, and of course here we are. So that's fantastic. So what I want to do is just talk a little bit about 28 users. So let's start there because that seems to be the starting point, although I'm sure there was more behind that. What is 28 users and where did it come from?
20 Muses cultivates creativity and creative power through wonder and play. And to me, it's a future work company because creativity, I think, is really the remaining advantage that we have over machines, right? Where did it come from? 20 years ago, my college roommate at NYU and I, we're both artists. We ultimately went on different careers, but as artists put together randomly assigned roommates, we just had these vibrant discussions about imagination and curiosity and creativity, and then bringing our friends and doing creative action together, letting people, paint on the wall if they wish, just let go. And I think over the years, as I spent 8 years on Wall Street, first in investment banking and then corporate strategy and corporate VC. I think the older you get, the more time you spend in corporate, your imagination and curiosity, it just starts to like erode.
Just gets that
Right?
dull, doesn't it? It just gets
Just watch,
pushed
just
down
watch
by the
it.
pressure. Yeah.
Like literally the erosion of the beach just slowly washed away. And there's so much suppression of creativity in the corporate world. And we just realized it was just more necessary than ever before. And so 28 Muses now is my main, company, that my main thing that I work on, and it's with my former roommate at NYU. We work with corporate teams. Post-pandemic, mostly virtual, really. 90% I would say of our work with teams is virtual. And we use creativity and wonder as tools to build authentic connection, to stimulate imagination that leads to innovation, and build empathy. Instead of having office culture built around like the keg or going out for drinks or having a nice dinner, using art and music and creativity as tools to build that connection and for people to open up, talk about things and be personal in ways that you would never do in an all hands meeting or a regular Zoom meeting. Or even in just a casual, drinks where you're just talking about chit-chatting about your family. So that's 28 Muses in a nutshell. Really, just cultivating imagination, and I think that will be one of the most like important resources in the workplace in the future work.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting 28 moves because it's actually a group of artisans, right? Is the way I see it, with those different music or art or whatever, the different derivatives of that, and people getting involved with those different, because it's platforms for everyone. And your trajectory has been very similar. So we were talking about off air. We were talking. Your trajectory has been very similar to remote AF around about the same time, and the pandemic has pushed that change. And you say most of that is online now. How do you see that experience? Has that been really embraced by people now?
Yeah. So pre-pandemic, a lot of culture was around the office itself, right? Like coming on a Friday, the Friday lunch, or Thursday night, in finance, it was like on a Thursday night going out for drinks. Or, when I was in banking, it was going out like midnight or 1 a.m. for drinks. And I think during the pandemic, the whole concept of the office actually has been challenged. So if you take that away, now what is culture? Where does culture come from, right? If everyone is remote. And I love how in our community for future work, which we'll get to, it started by talking about where people work, but really the future work is the who, what, when, where, why people work, right? All of it. And I think people just very quickly realize like Zoom is just very like easy and it's inclusive, right? So we work with a lot of remote teams where they're distributed between California and New York and everything in between and Europe, right? And it's just the most inclusive way to do stuff together is like New York midday, right? California morning, New York midday, Europe at the end of their day. And because it's virtual, you can include your consultants, your freelancers, your fractional, employees, your developers in Eastern Europe. Like just invite everyone. And, it's more inclusive than before, where only the people in the office could go out for a nice, drinks or dinner.
Yeah, that's the thing. You get that, like even us, right? Speaking right now, it surely would be your afternoon there, I think, and I'm early morning here, but it's still palatable, and we can get involved. So I think it's brilliant, and I like that the understanding of the different platforms that you have available, and people are getting involved right across the world. Because I think that's the other thing that remotes offered us that we really weren't. I think we knew that it was there because I've been doing the distributed thing for a long time before it was remote. And the pandemic and a number of things have pushed us that way. But it offers us, the brightest talent, the brightest people, and the brightest opportunities that you probably would never get involved with. How have you found the mix of cultures coming in? That's the interesting thing for me with 220 years, because I can see that you, as you said, you've got people coming from across the world. What's that like, that sharing of the culture?
So I would say that our unique facilitation style is to get people to open up without being overly vulnerable. And this is where creativity comes in, right? A lot of people, when they think like, oh, let's do something different, arts and crafts, they think paint night. Do you guys have paint night over there? Right? That became popular pre-pandemic because a lot of people equate art with painting, or creativity with being being good at drawing or painting. And actually, I would argue that that's not the best way to, ignite creativity or build connection, because when everyone is sitting down and painting the exact same thing, and the outcome is expected to be same, or if you're doing a cooking class and you're cooking the same dish, right? You're watching the chef do it, and you're really just imitating and copying and trying to make it look as good as the chef's dish on the video on the Zoom. You're not actually allowing people to really like open up, their mindset and experiment and be creative. So for us, what's important in our design is that every event is designed so that everyone has a different outcome. So no one is drawing the same thing, painting the same thing, cooking the same thing. And I think it's allowing people to express themselves. That expression is what is one is amazing, because you just, it's always surprising and unexpected, and it results in more respect, I think, for your colleague always when you see something wonderful and unexpected. And two, it builds that empathy. You actually get a glimpse into how someone approached something. What was their thought process, their decision process? Why did they choose to write this story? Why did they choose to build that character? Why did they choose to like interpret, music in this particular drawing style? And then and to me, that's where that connection comes from, having a glimpse on understanding how someone thinks. That's that true empathy. And over time, it becomes the trust and the bonds.
That's fantastic. So fast forward a tad, and you talked about it, and you prefaced it, building the future of work. So community, I've seen that launched and start to crystallize, and part of a couple of the journeys in that. How did you get from this 28 years to that? And I suspect we might want to tell people what that is as well.
Yeah. So personally, I'm just so grateful for the future work. And to me, it's like an invisible portal on Earth. Like everyone just going through the motions pre-pandemic, dropping off your kids at work, always rushing to drop off your kids at school so you can get to work. And then, you go through the motions, and then you pick them up, and then you do the homework and you cook dinner. It's like, and then as they say, you wake up and you're like 50 and you're like, what happened to my life? And I feel like during the pandemic, this portal, this invisible portal, once you walk through it, it was like the rules were different, right? You didn't have to go through the motions anymore. You can just create your own playbook, create your own rules. You can work, do the work that you want, when you want, how you want it, for the reason that you want it. And personally, I feel like it just gave me like a new life, like it was a reset for the whole world, but specifically for my life, I felt like it allowed me to really reset, my work-life balance. And I could see, I feel like you can see the people who walk through the portal, their life is different. Their life is better after the pandemic. Like they have more balance, they have less stress, they have more purpose. And I can see some of my friends are stuck, I feel like, in the pre-pandemic. Like they just didn't walk through this portal. And I feel like you can even see whole companies that have embraced the future work by giving their employees, more flexibility and just like, adopting and adapting to all the new kind of like needs that people voice. Whole companies can walk through the portal where like their whole workforce is happier, versus there are definitely companies that is trying to go back to what things were pre-pandemic and really like being stuck in the motions.
Yeah, we're seeing that, yes.
So, I mean, I'm personally just grateful for the future work, and I wanted it started because I wanted to just gather people who are future work builders, and a lot of them turn out to be B2B founders that are, trying to achieve the same thing, talking to a lot of the same clients, approaching to a lot of the same, HR folks and workplace folks. And it just makes sense, I think, for us to come together to learn and share. So now it became, buildthefuture.work. We just rebranded to that. People can come check out the website, find us on LinkedIn. We have now almost 2,000 builders, over 700 founders, 150 VCs that are self-identifying as future work investors, angels, and then the rest are builders in other capacities, engineers, marketers, other executives who together want to reimagine work and workplaces and learn from each other.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that as to how it actually works and the premise that you've put underneath this portal or wrapper as you speak about. When people get involved, how does it work for them? What are the premise of the things that you do?
I've spent the last year or so really trying to understand like what do people want and what do people need in the community. And we did again a recent survey before we rebounded, and because there's a lot of founders, hundreds of founders in the community. One, they need help with fundraising. So once a month, we have a fundraising office hour in the metaverse where we try to get a few different, investors, and you can hop around and meet the investors. And we realized that's the best way to facilitate those meetings, because if you're watching a webinar or LinkedIn Live or even on Upstream or certain, it's passive. You're not actually pitching the VCs. So we found Newbie is one of the companies in our community. They host these metaverse office hours. You can just jump from room to room and video chat with, investors one-on-one or in a small group. We're also going to start having other experts available for you to make your ask, like having a startup lawyer, startup ops expert, accountant. So all your burning questions, just bang it out. Twice a month on Tuesdays, 5 p.m., we have a networking session where we're spotlighting a founder within the future work and an investor within the future work, and then just really digging into, individual areas. So last week, for example, we had Anisha from Verbate.io digging into employee communities. And I never really gave ERGs, employee resource groups, any thought really, but, we learned about how ERGs is actually a really powerful, they've existed for decades, but now they've become really a powerful tool for, for DEI, for belonging. And there's all this talk that belonging is really the biggest indicator of retention. And ERGs actually, if you give them more power, give them more agency, it can really strengthen that sense of belonging, of being seen and heard and feeling like, you have a place in the workplace and And, like at HubSpot, for example, I think the parenting group is like over, 1,500 people,
Wow.
and they can really connect on, those are the parents that really care about parenting. So they can,
Yeah.
they share things between each other, and feel like another dimension of connection with their colleagues. So the next Tuesday, we're going to have Janine Sua, who just launched a new future work fund, to tell us her origin story of her new fund and exactly what she's investing in. So learning and sharing is one of the biggest things that people said they wanted. And I think a monthly is maybe not enough for this connection. So we decided to do weekly, Tuesday at 5. And it's a challenge, right? We're all champions of distributed workforces. So my vision is for a certain closeness to happen, so that we become like a digital cluster, the same way that like Hollywood is a cluster, Wall Street is a cluster, Silicon Valley, right? Those are the three biggest examples of industrial clusters where by proximity was the key to the innovation, and collaboration that ended up, changing the world. And that's our challenge. How do we build proximity when we're all distributed? um but I think we're getting there. I'm getting amazing feedback about the value that people are getting, the dots being connected, and how that's impacting people's lives at work.
I love these amazing communities like yours that are springing up and giving everybody, and it doesn't matter where. And the other thing I find amazing about this community is, um, there is no bounds, there's no ethnicity, there's no, um, you know, gender. There's none of that kind of thing exists in these remotes. It's just people coming together because they have this like-mindedness from different parts of the world and sharing their experiences. Um, to me, that really is the future of building work. So a lot of these organizations that are talking to you, they're all remote organizations or remote slash hybrid organizations. Is that the case, or are they physical as well?
I think of all kinds, right? So we have some, for example, the future work team from PwC, right? That like, they do their own consulting for their own clients about what future work is. A lot of those large corporations are hybrid, right? Down to really small teams, early stage teams where the whole team has never met each other. So everything, and everything in between. And hybrid remote work is obviously one of the biggest topics. So like remote app, sway workplace, like density. We have a bunch of companies that are, their purpose, what they do is helping their clients break down the nuances of remote work.
Yes, yes, and of course that's what we do. But that's brilliant. So with that particular type of community and digging in deeper, you've certainly set the premise about how it's coming together. You've set the premise about how you're getting people to interact, and I can see the different opportunities to network because I'm part of the community as well. Where are you headed? What's the future vision for it? Because I'm sure that you're thinking about that now, just as much as my organisation is. What's our next step?
Yeah. So I think, when I reference the clusters, right? The textbook clusters of like Wall Street and Hollywood, I don't think that there's yet a cluster for future work. And I want our community to be that digital cluster, that when an HR person at a Fortune 500 company says, I need to learn about the future work, where do I go for that? That they would come to this place where the most innovative, forward thinking thought leaders have gathered to dig in and learn and share. And we're just, slowly building it out still. It's still very, very much early days. But I would like in 5 years that, this is it. Buildafuture.work has the answers. Some might be tried and true things that like a large, huge corporation could just like, it's a SaaS solution that you can adopt right away. I think there will always be a lot of like little, forward thinking, pioneering tools that maybe it's too fresh for the huge corporations, but smaller companies, startups, agencies can try those out. a lot of people say, well, future work is now. It's already, it's not the future. The future is now. That's true in a sense, but if you hear about the things that the companies are building in our community, they're always building for tomorrow, right? Like as long as today is today and tomorrow is tomorrow, all these early stage founders, they're building something that won't be mainstream until maybe 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Right. And so if you come to this community, this is where you discover the cutting edge of, what will be the Slack, 10 years from now.
Yeah, that's so true. I worked with some, what we call community research centers, smart funding, back in the early 2000s. And interestingly enough, I'm still seeing some of those things that they're working on. It astounds me, popping out now, and it's taken that long for them to come. They were that far ahead of the curve that they were thinking. And I think you're seeing that even more with the acceleration of the pandemic helped us accelerate that. So some good came out of it, I suppose, but the things, the tools, the availability of the tools, like some of the people I've talked to on this cast, they're already building tools that we never even saw before. Even you think about it, we only had Zoom in the beginning that was really, really good, and everybody was using that. But now there's a plethora, all the different tools are catching up, and then there's people pushing the boundary with those. So
yeah. And Zoom now is starting their own marketplace, right? And so now there's an explosion of apps built for Zoom. So like when we started last 2 weeks ago, we started using Twine, which is an app for Zoom that facilitates, all kinds of different breakout rooms. Just removes the friction just a little bit, that much easier to do, all these different breakouts and Zoom for different purposes, so that you can be really flexible depending on the purpose. If you wanted to match like mentors and mentees, if you wanted to do different kinds of, roundtables. So there's an explosion of that. And even terms being coined, like to us, fractional work is like something that's just we've already talked about it many times. But when I talk to some of my friends, like they've never heard of fractional work. Like, what is fractional work? Like they've heard of freelancer or being a consultant. Those terms have been around for decades, right? So people identify as a freelancer if they're working part-time or they have different gigs, or the gig economy. And you see a little bit of like on LinkedIn, someone saying I'm a fractional CMO or fractional CFO. It's still like very much the early days of these terms being adopted, right? I think that might be mainstream 10 years from now. And
that's definitely true. Yeah, you're seeing them pop up, and you go, oh, that's a new term, or that's a new role that we haven't thought about. And I think you and I were talking a little bit about, HR is one of those amazing bastions that's happening now as well. The recognition that now your work is in your home and your home is in your work, they're having to think about how we do that as well. And I'm sure you come across those in your communities as well.
Yeah. I mean, most of the companies and community all touch HR and mostly B2B. The fractional work one, turtle.os is one in our community. And I mean, HR, there's just hundreds of them tackling all various aspects of HR.
Yeah, well, because it's opened up a whole different world, hasn't it? So the other interesting thing I think is that, as you're saying, these communities are only going to become more because the real estate thing, the validity of having these big real estate options where you have people crammed into them is that is, for companies that, what I believe the smart companies are going to survive for a very long time, going, we don't need that anymore, right? We can operate in these digital hubs and digital bastions, much like future of the work.
Yeah. So real estate and workplace, it's a whole category, right? So in our community, for example, the former New York GM of Knotel, he was head of asset management for Knotel, and he left, in the middle of the pandemic, Shegu, and now he's working on something new. And I like, I hope our community, it's not an official incubator, like a startup incubator, but we really are incubating a lot of the ideas, right? And just that co-working or office space, that segment alone. For example, we have Kettle Space in the community.
Yes.
Nick is the founder, where before pre-pandemic they were working, turning restaurants into co-working spaces, and it's an amazing story of how they really had to pivot during the pandemic. And now for example, they're working with NYU on turning all the excess extra spaces at NYU into co-working spaces for everyone at NYU, teachers, professors, students, to be able to share and know where to go and who's where. And then Croissant and a bunch of other companies are aggregating these, spaces. So there's just so many ways to go about it, right? You have people, you have spaces, you have laptops working from home, and then there's just every way of slicing and dicing those three things together.
It's so exciting, isn't it? It's funny you should mention Nick and Kettle. Shout out to Nick if he's watching this one eventually, because I've actually got him coming on very shortly. I've already recorded with him, so there'll be a cast with Nick. So it's interesting that it's a very small digital world. So fantastic. Look, we're getting very close to the end of our time. It's been fantastic to have you on all the remote things. Let me just give you that space to say, how do people get involved with 28 Muses? How do they get involved with building the future of work community?
Yeah, thank you. So build a future of work. You can find us on LinkedIn. We started on Upstream for the last year and a half. We're really now making LinkedIn our home, where, before and after the events, we're really using LinkedIn to engage, really for discussion, using as a forum. So I'd love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, or buildthefuture.work on LinkedIn as a company. 28 Muses, any team, if you have a team and you want to invest in your team to help them play better together, to cultivate, connection through creativity, I would love to meet with you. You can email me at jing@28muses.com, or just go to 28muses.com, and there's a place to book a time with us.
That's fantastic. Look, again, thank you for being on all the remote things and spending time with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's been sensational. I really have enjoyed that understanding of how you're building the community. I look forward to seeing how it happens. If you're watching this, please don't forget to go like, subscribe, so that we can keep this thing running for everybody. Join our community, remoteef.co, and click the community button. We have a remote community there on Circle. It's been a fantastic time to have you on all the remote things, Jing.
Thank you. Thank you so much.